You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussion, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome to Reason and Theology, everyone. Your host, Michael Lofton, on a Saturday morning. Christos Anesti. I am going to be joined here by two friars of the Franciscans of the Immaculate. We're going to be discussing Mary, the Mother of Fair Love, and the Profanation of Charity with Friar Roderic and Friar Charles. And let me go ahead and just read their bio real quick, and then I'll bring them on. Friar Roderic, he was born in 1962 and raised in Groton, Connecticut. He went to the University of Connecticut, graduated as a mechanical engineer in 1987. He worked as a naval architect for the U.S. Navy for several years. Converting to the Catholic Church in 1992, he joined the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate in 1998. He took some seminary courses before deciding to remain a brother. He started Air Maria video website in 2006, along with the associated YouTube channel, and then a Facebook page to spread devotion to Mary. And I personally, I'm going to detour real quick for the bio. I know in the past this channel has been very helpful to me, so I highly recommend it. The YouTube channel has 8,800 videos, 15 million views, and 75,000 subscribers as of March 2021. He's also building a new channel called Mary to the Moon that is meant to unite faith and science for true human progress in our high-tech world. He's currently pursuing a seat on the Dear Moon project that will take a trip around the moon as a means of promoting the message of unity of this channel. Now, we also have Friar Charles. Friar Charles entered the world in 1987, the Catholic Church in 2007, and the Franciscans of the Immaculate in 2011. He's currently a seminarian in the third year of theology in Rome. His interests include the theology of Father Peter Damian Felner, liturgy, and not time. He is on track to be ordained in the summer of 2022, unless hopefully the world ends first. I thought that was interesting. Let me go ahead and bring him on here in just a minute, y'all. Again, we're discussing Mary, the Mother of Fair Love, and the Profanation of Charity with Friar Roderic and Friar Charles coming up next. Brothers, welcome to the show. How are y'all?
Great intro.
Wow.
Oh, thank you. It's great to have you on. Honestly, this is an honor because I know your order has a reputation for fidelity, being faithful, to the church's teachings, and being faithful to Christ and the Virgin Mary. So I'm very excited to have you on. Thank y'all for coming on so far.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us on.
And in Friar Roderic, I got to ask a quick question. When it comes to the bio, we're talking here about, uniting faith and science. Is this because, wild theory here, is this because I know St. Maximilian Kolbe was an influence on your order, and I know that he at one point built a rocket, I believe, that was able to get to the moon, as I'm told. Is that maybe why?
He's definitely drawing one out, and definitely there's some sketches of that. Right, so that's
and the sketches would have worked at the time, correct?
Right. There's at least some people who were familiar with rocketry and aerospace that it would actually be plausible. So it was quite interesting.
It's pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah, he's there in 1920s and 30s in Poland. That was not the most advanced country in the world at the time, and had many economic headwinds, and so it happened.
Well, and if I can quickly ask, I don't want to sidetrack this too much, but what influence did he have on your order, the Franciscans of the Immaculate? And if you could also maybe just broadly talk about what is the order, how did it start, things like that.
Right. Well, we are a break off from the conventuals, which is the order that St. Maximilian Kolbe was in. And specifically, we are trying to follow up on what St. Maximilian Kolbe did, which was to put Mary as central to our to this Franciscan life, and following the all of the things like poverty and chastity and obedience that make up religious life in general, but specifically the Franciscan life. That Mary was the means to interpret and live the rule, the virginity of Mary for chastity, and the obedience of Mary. Thy will be done, as she said, and gave her fiat for obedience. And yeah, so that was that's the whole idea.
Yeah,
and living in Nazareth, right? So.
And Friar Charles, tell me a little bit what attracted you to the Franciscans. I mean, because you're pretty new to it. I mean, what, 2011? Is that right?
Yeah.
So what attracted you to it?
So while I was coming into the church, actually, I was already sort of looking at a vocation. I actually was still in RCIA when I made my first visit to the seminary. We watched that. There's a movie, I think it might be called A Time for Mercy, something that's about St. Maximilian, St. Faustina, and St. John Paul II. And I was very touched by St. Maximilian. And then after I had finished school, I also studied mechanical engineering. I started looking around.
Great field.
Yeah, it's a solid field. It's something you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I started looking around various things: Fraternity of St. Peter, Dominicans, Carmelites, diocese. But then I found the Franciscans of the Immaculate, and was like, well, this is trying to carry on the legacy of St. Maximilian, and particularly in a way, his reading of the charism of St. Francis. And then he was influenced by some other Franciscans who wrote at the time of the proclamation of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, the promotion of which was very much tied to the Franciscan order. And they said, well, what do we do now? And he has an excellent letter to students, the students of the order, saying, well, what do we do now? Do we just we've made our, is the proclamation of the dogma, the order's mic drop, and is it now time for us to exit stage left? And he said, no, what it is there's 2 pages to the Franciscan order. The first page was getting the dogma proclaimed, defended, defined. And then the second is now implementing that into the life of the church. And I see he's as a prophetic figure, because this is like the term that gets used later by, I think, von Balthasar, and then JP2 and Pope Benedict pick up on it. Is in the church, you have the Marian profile and the Petrine profile. And in a way, you could say that we see the Franciscan vocation to rebuild the church is to promote the Marian profile of the church, which is at the service, the service of the whole church. And it's not in conflict with the Petrine profile. They're two different. I'll stop there because I was thinking about this, and we spend the next hour.
No, that you're good. And for Roderic, same question. What attracted you to the Franciscans? I think you joined 1992, according to the bio, correct?
Right. Well, I joined the church in 92 and 98. I joined the Franciscans, the Immaculate, and I must say I met them at the pro-life march in Washington D.C. where I lived, and then. But I'd already read about St. Francis, and I had a strong Marian devotion already. And so I was attracted to the Franciscans from reading about the life of St. Francis, and then the fact that there was an order that had a Marian and Franciscan orientation was kind of conclusive. So that's and then they're also involved in the apostolate and using some of the high tech stuff that I'm following St. Maximilian Kolbe, using mass media to spread the devotion to Mary in a modern world. That seemed to be a perfect fit for what I was my background, technical background, and such. So.
Yeah, and so that ties into the apostolate of Air Maria, Mary to the Moon. Tell us a little bit more about them.
Right. Well, in 2006, we started a video channel, and it's about the time when things were really starting to change as far as internet. The internet's getting more powerful, and it's actually after we were thinking about doing this that we actually discovered YouTube. We didn't even know about YouTube before we started working on this, so we were kind of at the very beginning of the whole thing, and we even maintain our own station, our own source of video, and on a WordPress site that a lot of people were not doing. A lot of people were using YouTube as the main source, and then just having a embedded video on. So we're doing that for years, and at the same time had a YouTube channel, and we're growing on both things. And eventually, YouTube became more dominant as far as we still have the other channel, but as far as comments and views and everything, that started really growing to the point where it's now somewhat close to 100,000, and has potential. It's growing quite fast. So doing some live streaming and some a lot of conferences. There's a conference going on right now upstairs, so I'm sort of doing two things at once here. I'm doing a recording a conference and doing this. So it's been quite busy, and then yeah, I started this other site called Mary to the Moon, which is really sounds kind of otherworldly, but it's really quite down to earth, and similar to Reason and Theology, the title of your channel, that it actually involves science plus faith for true human progress. So the idea we have kind of today is that progress will only come from science, and what will hold us back is faith. So my idea is that no, we need to remember our faith as well, and that so it talks about unity not only between faith and reason, but our faith in science, but also between old and the past and the future, old and new, and conservative and progressive, so conservative and liberal. So I think today most of what's holding back progress is this contention between this polarization that has stagnated all progress. As basically anyone who wants to get any of their agendas done, as far as whether it be ecology on that might be a noble one on the liberal side, or moral values on the conservative side. It's all stymied by the and made impossible by this polarization. And if it gets worse, it'll actually set us back. If there's a civil war, the first thing that's going to suffer is ecology, or morality, if that's what you're concerned about, or the economy. Everything you care about will be very much wiped out. Be the first casualties. So I think we really need to put that on the forefront, and now clear a lot of the poison from the air, and the remedy what's causing, I think, the polarization is materialism, and mostly pushed by advertising, and that's actually fitting perfectly with the discussion we were talking about today, with the profanation of charity, because the opposite of materialism is spirituality and the charity associated with that. And that's sort of what I talk about with, I have a whole thing about fixing Facebook, for instance. The polarization of Facebook. So Facebook's been widely criticized for being very polarizing, which is a very big surprise, because everyone thought it's going to be a unitive thing. It's an inherently unitive technology. And yet without spirituality, look what happens. It becomes something that's anything but unitive. Yeah. And and I actually have a down-to-earth program for changing that, incorporating the idea of artificial intelligence, or factoring that in, that just changing the ratio of commercial advertising to charitable advertising. Very, very powerful forces of advertising, social media, and artificial intelligence will be turned around to become a powerful, equally powerful unitive force. that can give us a lot of hope in today, when we kind of think of division as being almost a given and almost I think it defines our times. I don't think it has to. I think there is a reason to have a hopeful future, and if anything, we'll come further ahead with the church more prominent, and unity and hope being very much a part of our lives and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives.
Yeah. And I have to say about the Air Maria, I remember this was a while back, probably 2014 or so, watching some of the videos, and they were really good and very helpful. I remember seeing Father Ignatius, which I understand is the superior Friar Roderic at your location. You're in the United States, and Friar Charles is in Italy, correct?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand he's the superior at your location. At the time, I don't think he was a superior, but I remember seeing his videos, and they were very helpful. And I reached out to him, and he was able to give some really good spiritual advice. And at the time, I wasn't able to find any good advice nearby. So I really appreciate y'all's apostolate and what you do, because you're available to give people worldwide good content and even spiritual advice. It was just really phenomenal. So I really have to commend y'all for that.
Oh, good. Glad we were helpful. Yeah.
Now, let's dive into discussing Father Felner. Friar Charles, I understand this is kind of your expertise. Talk to us a little bit about him. Who is he? Why is he important to this topic?
So Father Peter Felner was a conventual Franciscan. He did his doctorate finished his doctorate in Rome in 1959 on the ecclesiology of Bonaventure and the role of charity in that. And putting the role of charity as the glue of the church, what constitutes what the church is, that we had Dr. Goff and Father Peter Capes organized a what's it called, a Festschrift symposium on Father Felner several years ago, and one of the priests who was presenting on that commented how later, when this doctoral dissertation was published in 1965, it was commented that it reads like a commentary on Lumen Gentium, but it was written several years beforehand. But that entrance into dogmatics through ecclesiology is one of the most important points. Then later on, he became more and more interested in St. Maximilian, particularly as how St. Maximilian witnessed to the eventual reforms of the Second Vatican Council. And he began to deepen that more and more. In the 1980s, that came to a head in the controversies within the conventuals, and he decided to try his fortunes with us in 1992. He entered us and then spent some time doing a lot of publishing, writing. He was the rector at our seminary in the United States until that was shut down in, I think, 2002, and everything was moved to Italy. Then several years ago, he decided to go back to the conventuals. He had entered the conventuals when he was 14, so he was very familiar with them, and so he went back there. And then several years later, he had a fall and hit his head and died shortly thereafter. But in his work, so he studied under some of the greatest Scotists of the day here in Rome. And that shows, because he's able to tap into the tradition instead of trying to approach it from the outside, like so many of those who are involved in Scotism that approach it without an understanding of the oral tradition. Because, as you may know, the works of Scotus are a mess. We basically just have huge rough drafts of most of his works. And so unlike where you have Thomas Aquinas or Bonaventure, where you have these very fine-tuned literary monuments, you're working much more with an oral tradition, and that was all destroyed in the 1800s because of the revolutions. And that goes into part of St. Maximilian's reading of this, is that's because with the proclamation of the dogma, that time for study, the in-depth study where you have these houses of hundreds of friars dedicated to study, that had come to an end. And we're now entering a new phase of the church. And so Father Peter Felner tries to go into this deeper, and so I have some of his works here. There's one that, so he was involved with another apostolate that we have called the Academy of the Immaculate, which is our publishing arm. We have one from him called St. Maximilian Kolbe, Pneumatologist, that got sparked in a response to some debating over Scott Hahn's description of the Holy Spirit as sort of a feminine figure, citing St. Maximilian, and then that sparked a very strong reaction from the New Oxford Review. And so Father Peter tried to step into the middle and write an article that ended up into a book. Then most recently, only it came out, I think, only about a year ago, is his book, The Theologian of Auschwitz.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that around, yeah.
Which is basically trying to give the backgrounds for St. Maximilian's theology and show how it's valid on, the three levels of both it's faithful to the church, it's like academically respectable, and that it is holy. In fact, we're actually doing with Dr. J. Isaac Goff a seminar.
He's been on the show many times. Yeah. So
we're actually doing a sort of weekly seminar. It's rocky when the number of meetings, but we.
Is that where y'all have different theologians come in? Because I've seen Dr. Goff, I've seen Father Koppas and others who are teaching, and there's some Franciscans around them. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that would have been the symposium, I think. We're actually doing right now a seminar just basically for us, but then we're posting it afterwards on YouTube.
Okay.
And so that can be found on the Air Maria website or Air Maria YouTube channel, where we're basically just digging into this book with Father Peter and the Theology of St. Maximilian. And it's and a lot of this, in fact, the title, Profanation of Charity, is a phrase that Father Peter uses to contrast with the example of St. Maximilian, the Martyr of Charity. And then in Our Lady, we have the creature who sums up in herself all created charity and is united to divine charity, the Holy Spirit. So that's if people are interested in St. Maximilian, I would definitely suggest we only have about 10 up now, but each of them is about 2 hours long, and they're rather dense, and they're very good.
I can only imagine. I look forward to seeing that, and also reading the book, The Theology of Auschwitz. I've seen it around, but I have not been able to read it. But I've been extremely impressed by St. Maximilian, especially what he did in Auschwitz, taking the place, as I understand, of another person. Just for those of y'all who might not be familiar with what St. Maximilian did, not to derail us too far, but I think it's important for people to hear this. Could one of y'all maybe discuss that? Friar Roderic, maybe if you wanted to tell us briefly, what did St. Maximilian actually do at Auschwitz that really made him a saint?
Well, it's interesting. He of course, what he did before that was start this whole high-tech apostolate of mass media with the printing press, which is the highest thing back in the 1930s. Radio was just starting to get going back then, which is the next step, say, beyond anything beyond that. So he made the largest publishing house in Europe. religious one in Europe, and then the largest publishing house at all in Poland. So basically, think of the New York Times as being a Catholic institution. So that's kind of what we was able to accomplish there. And it kind of all came to an end, though, when the Germans invaded Poland, and they took over the facility there and arrested quite a few of the friars, including some Maximilian Kolbe, and confiscated the printing presses. And so basically, you can almost like in a lot of stories, you just end it there. That they kind of like everything he did came to an end, and it was kind of sad, and he went off to this death camp, which is what Auschwitz was, the ultimate death camp. And yet when he goes there, he actually puts in this whole love of Mary Immaculate to everyone he could, including Jews that he met there. And but at one point there was a prisoner who escaped, and the unwritten rule there, perhaps it was very much the rule, was that if someone escaped, 10 people would have to die in his place. And it wasn't just a simple death. It was a death where you're thrown into a dark, black bunker with no windows and no food and no water. And you're basically shot in there to despair and die a miserable death. And everyone knew how bad that was, because everyone's already half starved already. You're already in starvation was a very common form of death. It wasn't just the gas chambers. So you were everyone was very much afraid of dying, of not being deprived of food, and the whole idea was horrifying. And one person who was being dragged away basically cried out, saying, "Well, my family, my wife and my children, what will they do?" And so Maximilian Kolbe, who was in the ranks of the prisoners who were basically in a roll call type thing, and we're there for like hours in the sun, which is another part of the torture, was just step forward right in front of the armed guards, and which is usually a way of getting shot, and said, "I'll take that person's place." And he said, "Who are you?" "I'm a Catholic priest," he said. And then he and of no use to you or this camp, I'll go in his place. And he basically the commandant kind of was flabbergasted and didn't know what to do. And he kind of capitulated. He kind of said, "All right, bring him back and switch him off." And he went in there, and instead of the usual cries of despair that came out from the hellhole of the starvation bunker, songs of praise of Mary came out, and joy, and apparently had quite an effect on the whole camp, because the word went around, and kind of the whole tone of the camp, at least for a while, changed. That basically the idea that you can avoid the despair of this hellish place is possible. And he died. He actually didn't die of starvation, which is interesting, because he held on so long that they just basically said, "Well, you need this starvation bunker for the next batch we're going to kill." So they went and injected him, and that's I think one of the promises of St. Francis, that no friar would ever die of starvation. Here's a friar went in there almost doomed to starvation, and even he didn't die of that. But
wow,
he's like and he was it's one of the reasons why he's canonized as Martyr of Charity, but he's also a martyr for the faith. I think he was first canonized as Martyr of the Faith, and then later canonized as Martyr of Charity, and that was actually kind of a new thing, because whereas Pope Francis now made it almost a normal thing, where you can go and if you go to a place that puts yourself in danger, that enough is grounds for being a martyr, for being declared a martyr.
He correct me if I'm wrong here, but was it the case that the man whose place he took was present at his canonization? Is that accurate?
I think it is, yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
He went around. Unfortunately, his wife and children died. I'm not sure if you ever saw them again, but he was basically though free to go out, and he did survive the camp, and he did, as you say, but he went out and promoted, proclaimed what Saint Maximilian Kolbe did for him. And we actually came to our friary in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And get a talk on him, and that's one of the last talks he's ever gave. That's 1997 or so, just about a year before I entered. So I missed that talk, but I would have actually had a chance to talk to the man. That strong connection to St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's a source of encouragement for all of us and helps spur us on to live holier lives when we hear such a saint and what he did.
Right.
He actually did something that amazing that it makes our life, our struggles, our difficulties so much trivial compared to what he went through. It makes it so much easier to deal with our problems when we just think of what he had to put up with. So
it's something I have to remind myself a lot of.
Right.
Well,
It's hard to complain and think, oh man, I'm going through so much, when you have people like this and they're in this bunker praising God and singing hymns to Mary and things like that, when they have every reason to feel discouraged. So it's encouraging to hear that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Mary and Charity, and please describe the profanations of charity. Friar Charles, if you want to take that one.
So the term is, like I mentioned, it's used by Father Peter himself in his works. He's taking it from a French book, and I don't read French, so I'm going to have to stop there on that comment. But that the point that it is materialism. So you can make 3 points based off of this that Father Peter would make related to St. Maximilian. Is that first you have materialism, you could say the sexual revolution, which is in and of itself, and I was reading a very interesting thing from earlier today, that the sexual revolution itself is not so much about sexuality as it is about who determines what's right and wrong. And I mean, this, I don't know from the memory, but if I remember correct, the daughters of the vice of lust, according to Saint Thomas, include basically that you're seeking the forbidden pleasure, and so one of the effects of giving in to lust is to hate God, whose law is against that. But so that's part of it, is this sensuality that puts my own satisfaction at the center. We see that in the sexual revolution in all of its myriad forms, but also going to its sort of, you could say, what I say, the consecrated of the sexual revolution, which are sort of, you could say, the gender ideology, in its extremes with transgenderism, that's such a third rail that's so controversial, because they're the consecrated, they're the sacrificial victims of the gender ideology, which you could say the sexual revolution, the revolution of the self, where I determine what's good. And so that's one part of it, is that this sort of absolutization of the self, often through sexuality, because it's such an important and deep part of ourselves. But then the second part of it is also with, you could say, what Father Peter calls puritanical social ideals. And we see this very much increasingly today with identity politics, where, especially the puritanical side, and this actually touches into something, I don't know if you're familiar with Auguste de Noce, an Italian thinker, who he saw that the communism of the Soviets was going to crumble, but then the communism, the Marxism, and the bourgeois, capitalism, consumerism would unite to form something that has the worst of both sides, where you have this absolutist material materialist ideology that it controls everything, tries to satisfy everything. You've lost, because Marxism has a religious aspect of that, this idea that if you only are able to create equality, or not, if you're only able to create equity, then the result will be this happiness. But with consumerism, you already, and getting back into the sensuality, you already have this sort of nirvanic state, in a way, painkillers and Netflix. And
wow.
And so this in fact, if I could just really quick read a quote from an article from Comunio by the American translator of this Italian thinker, and I can send you the link that I found this at. And this ties into some of the points that Roderic made just a moment ago. Quoting, generally speaking, the new totalitarianism does not persecute religion directly. It progressively empties it out by denying its cognitive significance, by declaring meaningless the very questions that faith is supposed to answer, and pushing it into the private sphere of the feelings. And the context of that quote is, we're talking about how in the Enlightenment, you have this battle between science and religion. And that's what we were talking about with Mary and the Moon. But the author of this article points out what this division is actually hiding is the negation of metaphysics. We're saying either you have science or you have this sort of fundamentalistic religion, but there's neither of them are trying to, both of them are emptied out of any sort of actual understanding of a sense of the whole. And I know you recently had Jonathan Peugeot on, and he gets into this very much of the sense of things, the whole, you could say the analogy that ties everything together, where you have, the analogy of faith, the analogy of being, and then in scripture we would talk about typology, or the analogical sense. But anyway, so Father Peter, the Profanation of Charity has those two elements, but then a third is also a reading of what is love, and where you have this very cynical idea of saying any love for something is in itself fallen, in itself perverted. If it's a choice for something, it's already no longer love. It's already self-seeking. It's already ideology. And the only true love is just perfect, selfless, self-donation, gift, perfect selflessness, where you just, you're not loving something, but it's just perfect, you could say, availability. But the problem with that is that you're denying, and this is part of the controversy over the movie Silence, where it seems to signify this at the end, like the ultimate act of love is to apostatize for your neighbor. And so this is this sort of cynicism that says love of something, love of God, saying fidelity to God is the most important thing of one's life, even if it causes, even if, in the face of suffering for oneself, or maybe even for others, in the sense of, by being faithful to the teachings of the church. Those who are not comfortable with the teachings of the church are not comforted by your fidelity. And saying that, if you're going to really love God, you have to be willing to just have this sort of absolute mercy, where there's no sort of justice at all. And then the response to this is to identify, well, what is love? Because we have three mistaken ideas of love. What love, where it's just endless generosity without love of something. or another is love as sensuality. Love is the affirming of my own good, and that you have to affirm my own good, because if you don't, then you're denying that I am good. And then the third of this sort of social ideology that claims to be love, but is very, very far from it. And the answer to this is Our Lady, because she is, as the title was, the mother of fair love. And she manifests what love itself is. And I don't know if you want to pass over to Roderic Burke.
That was actually going to be the next question I was going to ask Friar Roderic. If you could tell us about true love, what exactly is it? How does it contrast with what we tend to think of love in the world?
Well, yeah, there's this idea of love for oneself and what love can do for us, and then love for love itself. And so God is love. Okay, so that's kind of the point. And to love God is the ultimate form of love. Whereas what Friar Charles is saying is that this idea that love should be kind of objectivelessness, like a subjective love that just all out. I'm nothing. I'm a doormat. I'm give everything up. Total self-emptying. All that's good in a way, but you need to have something that you're. It's where transcendent God is so important, where really love's about the other and considering yourself part of the other, and God is the ultimate other, the ultimate transcendent. And if you don't have that, then you don't really have a sense of what is good about love. And God, so if God loves himself, he's not good, because he's he's loving himself, right? So that's not good according to the modern this modern profanation of charity. And I think that's kind of key, is that selfishness is indeed part of the profanation of love, and I think that's gone into the divisiveness of that. And I think it actually points that out, that there's this two forms of materialism. That's anti-charity, is the materialistic consumerism, and the other side is the puritanical one, which is kind of the conservative wing of it, I guess, or can be the conservative wing. So you can get into both. In a philosophical point of view, you do get into this idea, this divisiveness even of itself. And I think, I relate this to that, to advertising as being a very, very powerful force in our society that has driven the consumerism, and therefore I'm addressing that in The Marriage to the Moon. And but it's hard to get anyone to listen to that, because you're talking to conservatives and you're talking to liberals, and both are not interested in talking to each other at all. And anyone mentions that is like, bye bye, I have other things to do. This makes no sense. And that's actually why I'm trying to go on this bring Mary to the moon on this Dear Moon project, which is actually bringing a bunch of originally a bunch of artists, which so I didn't think I was even can even go on. So it's very, very, very improbable that I should go on, being old and a friar. But that's kind of the point, is that if I did go on it, it would really bring attention to this idea that nothing else could. That holy smokes, what's this friar doing here? And I'll be the and that would get people's attention, and put a spotlight on something that no one's willing to put a spotlight on. So it's sort of
let me ask you a follow-up question with something you were saying a moment ago. You were talking about love of neighbor and true love. How can we sometimes our neighbor does terrible things and it's hard to love them. How can we have true love for them in spite of maybe their behavior?
Yeah, it's a good question, because in our society today, we're not willing to talk to each other because I think we're so badly offended by the other side. Each side of their polarized world is very angry at the other side, and so I think we see that with the politics with the Trump and the whole riots there at the Capitol, and so everyone is all worried about the the fall of democracy, and then but it's also just a mutual each side has really good reasons to be mad at the other side, and we do have to have some way of backing off from that. I go into this thing about Mary and or really about materialism in a way of uniting. The two sides can kind of see materialism as a thing that drives the problems of both sides, whether it be pollution on one side because of materialism generates pollution, but also it produces a moral pollution. But I really go into the final analysis is really what more of Friar Charles is saying, and that is that Mary is the means to, she loves us all, even though we're the cause of her son's death, for instance, and that whole selfless aspect of it. I even go as far as to say that Mary, because the left versus right is also gets into this God versus man thing. So the left is kind of secular and man orientated, and the left on the right is God orientated and kind of gets into fundamentalist in the extreme sense, and Catholics can too. It's not just Muslims. It's not just fundamentalist Christians or Calvinist Christians. It's also Catholics can get involved in that, where they kind of like this God alone mentality that leaves out kind of an inhuman holiness that kind of opposes the unholy humanism of the left, And so, how do you get to? It does boil down to that, I think, where it's ultimately a religious question. Is it just man? Is man the real goal, the real thing, or is it God? Really, answer is both and Mary is where God and man come together in the person of Christ. So Christ is like the perfect union of man and God and of all thinking and loving people. That in Him is where charity and reason come together, where mercy and justice come together, where all of the God and man, all of any way you can possibly break down our polarized world and put a label on it, He puts it together and resolves it. And Mary is central in where that happens, both as far as the incarnation, but also her role at the foot of the cross, where she's suffering and seeing her son die and participating in that through her own suffering. It goes right back to the fiat in Nazareth when she accepts the role as Mother of God.
And Friar Charles, I know one of the things we were going to discuss also is the Virgin Mary and Saint Joseph and the reality of marital love. Could you maybe comment on that, since we're talking about love and we're talking about the Virgin?
So this comes out of a reflection from reading Amoris Laetitia, particularly chapter 4, where he talks about marital love, because then chapter 5 is talking about procreation or fruitfulness. So at least from how I read the Holy Father, he's saying, there's the experience of that first attraction that propels towards commitment, and commitment is solidified, and the dignity of the other is underlined in final commitment, that's marriage. And then through the stages of marriage, what you have sort of the early flower, and then the growing maturity. And at the end of that, the desire or the fruit of that union is a deep interpersonal friendship that, and just like the spiritual life, it takes various purifications, and any one particular marriage is not guaranteed to reach that final sort of purity and totality of love. But then I think it's when it comes to Our Lady and Saint Joseph, something you hear often is it's like, well, Saint Joseph, he was, a good guy, but poor guy, like he chose the wrong girl. Like that must have been a big disappointment. I mean, of course, there's all the exegetical arguments that no, they actually were in complete accord even before the Annunciation. But the response to that is they already had that depth of person, that union with God, the love of God itself, and were able to love in this sort of, like when you think of, maybe you could say the most closely united human couple you've ever met, usually in their 60s, 70s, 80s, where you have this sort of oneness. Like that's something that they would have had from the beginning. They didn't need to go through that process because, they had already been, they were living at sort of a height of the personal life and were able to relate and love in a depth that we normally don't get to, because we sort of go through this process of, where you have, all the bonding hormones and all these things that slowly bring the couple together into a more and more perfect friendship. And so, I think that's one response there when it comes to the year of the family and the year of St. Joseph, is that when we talk about marriage and the family, what we're ultimately talking about is a union of persons, that this sort of this relationship, this communion of love, and that unfortunately, in a way, that's become all about sexuality, and we've sort of lost a bit, I think, of the ideal of the friendship that is the goal, and that is only achieved through fidelity to God's plan. I believe you're muted.
I apologize. Yep, sorry. I had to type something there earlier, and I pressed the mute button and forgot to unmute it. So there was one other thing that I was going to bring up, and after that, I'm seeing some good questions in the chat, so we're going to jump into those. But y'all go ahead and send some more chat questions. So one of the other things we were going to discuss briefly was Mary and unity of the church. So, Friar Roderic, maybe if you want to touch on that.
Yes, well, certainly the most, it's not a coincidence, I think, that the most Marian church is also the most unified church. Okay, so the Catholic Church, against all odds, really, that has no central, it has a central political thing in the Vatican, but it really was a church that never had a central government that was on its side, say, except for maybe a brief time when prior to the fall of Rome. But really the Eastern Church had more unity as far as political unity, yet it ended up getting very disunified over time. Whereas Catholic Church, which had no real hope for unity, was very unified. And certainly in the modern sense, the idea is that truth is divisive. Well, you look at the Catholic Church's catechism. I don't have one in front of me, but if I can hold it up, it's real thick, and it's it's got 2,500 different articles in it, and all of them are articles of faith, and all could be points where we can argue. But really, despite all that, miraculously, in the face of so much division in the Christian Church, that gets into tens of thousands of denominations, amongst that, the Catholic Church is the most unified, is the majority denomination. So you take all those thousands of denominations and add them up, they don't add up to the Catholic Church. That is an ongoing miracle of unity, and I think it's not a coincidence that church is the most Marian church. granted, the Eastern Orthodox is very near behind, and very near behind in regard to unity as well, because they're unified by nations, whereas we're unified globally, universal, especially what Catholic means is universal. So I think the fact that we're the universal church is the Marian church is not a coincidence. But how and why, again, I think Mary is more at the center of faith than a lot of Christians realize, and even a lot of Catholics realize. So if Mary was more at the center, then we would have a lot of for a lot more unity for two reasons. One is the philosophy that she brings together God and man, and is therefore central in all things that Christ does as far as bringing people together. And they kind of personify what's in the left versus right mentality, which is something that's a very big part of the church, the Catholic Church, as well as the rest of the society. We've sort of absorbed that. We should actually be the source of unity. I think we should be the source of unity, as Mary is the source of unity, and I think and Christ is. She is, because she's united to Christ, and that's the point, is that she exemplifies this unity with Christ that will, by going closer to God, you'll get closer to each other. So unity between people comes together with unity with God, and of course Christ brings us in union with God through his redemption. And so Mary is central in that in several ways, as we discussed earlier. But also, I think there's also the grace side of things. Okay, so what we can do and how Mary can fit into that, but also how following the plan that God has given us for unity, we will win many graces that will give us a lot more power to actually live out what we know we have to do, and that is love our neighbor. Yeah.
And Friar Charles, I think, did you have a follow-up for that by any chance?
Yeah, so this is something that I've thought about quite a bit, and particularly in my own personal experience, because one of the famous things that is associated with our order is that there was a very strong push for the adoption of the extraordinary form, and then a very strong reaction, not necessarily to the extraordinary form itself, but to the manner in which it was implemented, which was, like many of the sort of, you could say, newer movements in the church, the figure of the founder becomes very, very central. And we see this right now with some things happening in Italy with the community of Bose, I think, where you have these communities where the leader becomes the center. Anyways, I come from a fraternity, St. Peter Parish, and so that was a very dear, the extraordinary form is something very dear to me. And so that was a very difficult, and is still difficult, but particularly in sort of coming to deal with that, because this was one of the big questions today with the, you could say, the traditionalist movement and church unity, is that I think Our Lady is the sort of central figure for church unity. And the analogy I use is in circular motion. So this is, speaking as an engineer, when you have a circular motion, you feel a force that pushes out, a momentum that pushes out, and that's centrifugal force. But then there's a force that pulls towards the center, and that's centripetal force. And so I think that because we have a very variegated church today, a polyhedric church, as the Holy Father has called it, when you have an openness to the action of Our Lady in your soul, that impels you to church unity. And so this is the thing that I emphasize with people, is that for church unity, even if we disagree, the important point is for all of us to, because right now you could say that it's the verse comes to me often that we have no, prince, prophet, or leader in our day. It's like, there's just so many voices, you don't even know who to listen to. But since we know that Our Lady is the Immaculate, she's the mother of the church, and she's not going to lead us astray, that if we come to her, and this is the prayer that I suggest, that we I'll pray often is, Mary, Mother of the Church, make me a child of the Church. And then we leave ourselves open to her maternal influence in our hearts, in our lives, in a way where we're not trying to control her, but we say, okay, I don't understand necessarily what it means to be a faithful child of the Church right now, so I need you to form me into being that. I think that would help a good amount with church unity, because I think that even if there's a lot of good that was lost that is being rediscovered, and that's a very that has, you could say, firecrackers, the post-conciliar firecrackers, and now we've got other firecrackers going off, is that if we leave ourselves open to the purifying, illuminating and unifying action of Our Lady in the Church, then we're going to be at a much, much better and more peaceful place.
And please feel free to, pass on or punt on this one if y'all aren't able to speak about it. But something you said there reminded me about something that was going on with the Vatican with Father Volpe and the founder of the Franciscans. Are y'all able to comment on what happened there, or is that still kind of ongoing, so can't really say a whole lot?
Most of it's public. I mean, I'm here at the basically at the heart of, in a way, the heart of the Institute at our seminary here in Rome.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I guess if I see a lot of the sort of discussions going on here, I think the difficulties is, like I said, charismatic movements, the founder becomes a very central figure. And to the point, and Franciscans have always had a problem with putting, you could say, piety before order. Yeah. And I mean, this is the history of the Franciscan order. It's been a rocky ride. But because it's like you want to imitate St. Francis. And it's like, I think I saw something with Matt Fradd, I think it was, with the Dominican. He says, we basically have a form of life where it's, do good, and there's a reasonable range for a friar. But then for the Franciscans, it's like, I want to be like Christ, like St. Francis. As a result, you have a lot of striving, and it often can go a bit off. But I think the main difficulties we have right now are it's an ongoing thing where hopefully we're coming to a conclusion within the next few years. COVID has definitely slowed things down because we can't meet. We can't have a general chapter. We can't get together and say, okay, we're going to move forward now. But yeah, so I just ask for the prayers of anyone who watches this, that we be faithful to what God has entrusted us with. And that in some way things are more difficult today, and in other ways they're, I think, on a significantly better footing.
Are y'all able to celebrate the extraordinary form right now, or is it limited to the ordinary form? It's
still very restricted. I think partly, and there's a video on YouTube, so this isn't of our seminarians meeting with the Holy Father like 5 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. And he basically said that what he had heard and what they had heard basically when they asked friars is that they felt they were being compelled against their will to use it. Mm-hmm. And I particularly remember being the MC for, I think it was, we were doing a Solemn High Mass or maybe just a Missa Cantata. And I remember just looking at the celebrant, and he was just miserable. Like he didn't enter an order that was using this. And while I entered the order already with an affection for it, there were many people who had no affection for it whatsoever. But part of the problem is because of this sort of central and the charismatic figure, that if he said, okay, we're going to use Latin now, then everyone would have, well, not everyone, but many people would have then embraced it as the best thing ever. And then if a week later he had said, actually, we're all going to become Pentecostals, or like the charismatic renewal, they would have thought that was the best thing ever. So, I mean, that's part of the problem, is you had a whole disconnect. And so, the Holy Father said, basically, this is not being implemented the way in which Pope Benedict wanted it to be implemented. And so we're just going to sort of bracket it out to the life of the Institute for the time.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I look forward to a resolution there.
I think we all do.
Years. Yeah. Now this one is from Grant Michael. How can a single person prepare himself to be a good husband? It's a good question. Any comments there? Oh, Friar Roderic, you are on mute. I think if you could unmute. At least I think you're on mute. I don't know. I couldn't hear him.
Okay, yeah. No,
there we go.
I just
okay,
the volume on the thing, and my little USB thing was also a mute button that I didn't know about. So okay, So I think obviously we're not don't have firsthand experience, and
but I mean, the thing is, monks still can really comment on these things, even without personal experience. They're in a great position to still teach on these things. So
sometimes viewing from the outside is sometimes the best vantage point because there's less emotions involved and less strain.
Could be a lot more objective.
That's right, a lot more objective. So, and basically, a lot of it is similar in the sense of we have vocation, and of course, that talks about something that we're always looking at as more vocations for our order too, and that's that reasons for going into say a religious order or to marriage is often different than why you stay in it. In other words, you kind of mature and you there's a lot of like love is blind, for instance. Okay, so you go into it and love is blind, but of course then your vision starts getting better after a while, and you say, well, who did I marry, or where did I actually join? Basically, you need to have an idea that this person is a good person, loved by God, and that's I think what we need to keep in mind is this one selfless point of view, in that sense of not being focused on self. What can this person do for me? But rather, what can I do for this person, and what are we going to become? What is this we that we're going to be as a religious order, or as a man and wife in a marriage, and growing as with children and grandchildren, and for many generations to come, which is really a wonderful thing. You think about what's going to happen with the marriage, and how many centuries and millennia in the future you're affecting. You're having this incredible effect. That's that's very analogous to religious our spiritual journey going and there's plenty of marital references to the kingdom of God, and that we are building a future. We are I like looked at the space. I'm always looking at the space aspect and space travel with my married to the moon, and I think of what are we going to build out there, and I think of every good deed we do on earth, as far as virtues and practiced love, and builds a future that we, our merits will be something that we can enjoy in the future. It's not just God perfects it and stuff, but it's our cooperation with those graces that builds this future, and the more good we do, and the more we do it for the love of God, the closer we will be to God and to that source of unity, that source of all goodness and love. That and we'll be kind of mad at ourselves, in a sense, as much as we can be in heaven, for what we didn't do, and what we didn't build, and what we didn't so we build on earth, as far as a family, as far as a society, as far as any good institutions on earth, will very much be analogous to whatever we build in heaven for our relationship with God for all eternity.
No, Grant Michael says, I love Franciscans. Awesome. Thank you for that super chat there, Grant. We share that sentiment here at RNT. Now, Pylos asked the question, how do I love Protestants when they are so antagonistic to Our Lady? That's a good question. Friar Charles, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I think from what I'm familiar with, I think all three of us are actually former Protestants.
Sure.
So I would say, I know myself, I was very anti-Catholic. I was antagonistic to Our Lady. And one reason that I entered our order is because she intervened, I think. And I have a whole spiel I can give about that. But, and the question is, well, how do you love? Because I mean, this is the thing, is it's our mother that we're talking about. And this is the difficult thing too, is because like this is a point that John Paul II makes in Redemptoris Mater, is that ecumenical discussions are honing in more and more on two questions: the cooperation of Mary in the redemption and the mediation of the church, because these two questions are very much interlinked, because without getting into it much, that the mediation of the church is based on the mediation of Our Lady. And or at least that's the condition for it. And so that's why Our Lady is oftentimes this critical linchpin in the movement from Protestant to Catholicism, because now you're admitting that there's a creative person who has some involvement in the economy of salvation. The difficulty with how do you love Protestants who are so antagonistic, I think one thing would be to assume the best will on their part, because their idea of Christianity is very much a God alone. Oftentimes it's very much like Christ alone, God alone, grace alone, whereas a sort of excluding of created participation. And so that's why they don't like the idea of merit. They don't like the idea of the sacraments. I mean, I'm not, it's an overgeneralization, but they generally don't have a very strong view of sacramental efficacy, mediation of the church, particularly, clerics, the idea that Christ's authority is mediated to us through the clergy. So I would think that seeing there that Our Lady is a figure for many other things, sort of under the hood, might be one thing, is that it's not, I don't think it's personal, but at the same time, I don't think they understand what her place in the economy of salvation is. So I mean, yeah, it's a difficult question. The main thing is just be patient, and if they have goodwill, because it's oftentimes they have goodwill, they want to respect our Lord, and they don't see respecting Our Lady as part of that, whereas we see it as part of that. And so I think be a good Catholic, because that was something that one of the things that affected me was meeting practicing Catholics who loved our Lord and loved the church. And I had always thought that was a mutually exclusive.
That's a really good point. This one is from Green Lake. What are the friars' opinions on St. Francis, especially in relation to other saints? Either one of y'all take a stab at it.
Well, St. Francis is great. Much better than any other saint. No, just there is inter order rivalry between the Dominicans and the Franciscans and the Jesuits, right, and all that. So that's always
he was the first one to receive the stigmata, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You
can't argue with that.
Something to be said there.
Yeah, I mean he's a great saint, and that's I do think a lot of the problems in our order are related to his kind of disorganized approach to things. So I think even our less better parts are also associated with him. It's kind of the lovable nature of both Francis and Saint Francis and the Franciscans. Yeah, I mean he was very unique. I think perhaps very useful for our times. He had both a poverty and a disdain for all the pomp and circumstances which the clergy was too much involved in the time, yet he had very strong respect for the clergy. So he, I think at one point, there's a story where he was going to confront a priest, and everyone gathered around him and says, "All right, this will be great." Then he go out there and confront this priest, and he goes out there and I think he kisses his hand, and the message was that he is deserving of honor because he's a priest, and this cannot be forgotten. Even if all the other bad things may have done are not, can't be forgotten either. There is still that respect that's owed, and this is very unique. It's very there's a lot of movements at the time that were very, like the Waldensians were very much an anti-clerical thing, and there's a lot of anti-clericalism today of the same note. That and there's reasons for that. And it's not like it's people are mad for no reason, as so much anger is today. But nevertheless, we need to get past it, and we need to and do it for the love of God and love itself. And I think this
is really, really good points. This one is from Rationale Católica. Why do we define love as the act of self-giving, especially the way Friar Roderic in his definition earlier? If you can maybe comment on that, Friar Roderic.
Yes, what I didn't mean to say that it was necessarily selfless in the sense of because Friar Charles is going into the idea that it's selfless in the sense of having no objective goal, no objective. You're not loving something. Like God is more than a thing. He's like the ultimate thing. He's the thing that brings all other things to being. But he is still a being, and he's needs to be loved. And so to love God is not so. It's not selfless in that sense. Okay, so, but it's selfless in the sense of here I am and here you are, and who's greater? And well, I'm the greater because I love more. Well, no, I mean we shouldn't even talk about that. In other words, that's kind of like the Pharisee and the Sadducees and the publican. The publican was basically saying how miserable he is, and the Pharisee was basically saying how great he is, and who was more forgiven by God was the publican, who was had every reason to believe that he was worse off, and most people would say was in a worse condition. So and it's that sense of not, pride is the ultimate evil, really. It's the source of all evil. Okay, and it's this love of putting yourself unrealistic idea of how great we are, but yet humility is reality too. It's all based on reality. It's all based on truth. That we need to have the problem with pride is that it's not true. That we don't. But we are necessarily has some good, and we do have some. God does love us, and this is a very important reality, a very important truth, and we shouldn't have this idea that we're all bad either. So we need to have this balance. It's kind of this both and, but we need to have selfless in the sense of not having an exaggerated idea of how good we are and how much we need to have these things in regard to materialism, and so charity is very much a renouncing of that and a renouncing of worldly things, and that's kind of like into with Mary to the Moon is that space travel is kind of analogous to going to heaven. You're going up to the heavens with a rocket. But in our world, we're kind of putting aside our earthly concerns and earthly desires and going to a more long-term heavenly desires and loves, and a lot of that is kind of lowering down our own love of self to a more realistic point.
And 101 Caliber asks, and Friar Charles, you could probably take this one unless you want it, Friar Roderic. Does your order prefer Scotism over Thomism? Have your interactions with Dr. Goff and Father Koppes introduced you to Palomism? If so, what are your thoughts, and is it compatible?
So we have, in general, there is a preference, I think, for Scotus, particularly because Scotus is so much associated with the Immaculate Conception, and his analysis of the economy of salvation is very much at the fundamental part, the fundamental understanding of St. Maximilian Kolbe and then of the Institute. And so there is an option for Scotus over Thomas. Both are doctors. Well, Scotus interpreted as following St. Bonaventure, and Bonaventure as an authentic interpreter of Francis. And Bonaventure is a doctor of the church. Scotus is a blessed. Thomas is a doctor of the church. Thomas and Bonaventure are the two principal doctors of the church. But there are different approaches. And one of the differences is that the Franciscans tend to be much more open to the Eastern, much more coherent or consonant maybe with Eastern theology. And this is something in particular that Father Capes and Father and Dr. Goff have gotten into in their work. In fact, I think Father Capes has actually found that in order to respond to Thomistic criticisms of Eastern theology, he's found translations of Scotus into Greek that they were using to give a response. So there is a very strong consonance between the two. And in fact, the video that I'll be posting soon, I need to get it up, of our last seminar with Dr. Goff, one of the things we talked about was St. Maximilian Kolbe and Palinism, and how both are very, the similarities of both, and the similarities of the Palimist movement, or the Palamite movement, and the Hesychast movement with the Franciscans. They were at about, they had similar contexts, and they were at a similar point in time in history.
I'd love to hear that one.
I mean, that's at a level above me. As I was preparing for this, I thought that if I say something interesting, it's because I have good teachers. If I say something that's not, it's because I'm a bad student.
Dr. Goff's a really good teacher. I look forward to you posting that. If you can maybe alert me whenever it's posted, I'd be grateful. Maybe we can watch it and even review it here on the show. Yeah. Brothers, go ahead.
That one was more of a question answer episode, so it's a bit more of like a popcorn, watching popcorn, than
even better.
More organized.
Even better. I actually like the Q&A format a little bit better sometimes than lectures, although I mean both have their utility, but sometimes I prefer the Q&A. But brothers, I appreciate y'all coming on and doing this. Y'all are welcome on anytime. Any parting words, anything that y'all wanted to put in a plug for? We've mentioned Air Maria. I'm going to put in a link for it. We've mentioned Married to the Moon. Do y'all want to add anything else to that?
Love what you're doing here, and so I want to put a plug for you, and then certainly we would love to have you come to our sites too, and our main site is actually marymediatrix.com. So marymediatrix.com, and that has a lot of our history and vocational stuff, and then also we have a website called Academy of the Immaculate that goes into all the all our books, and so we have quite a including by Father Capes and Father Peter, and then of course Air Maria. So go to there, and Married to the Moon, and and follow me there. I'm going into how we're going to try and go to the moon with Mary, and also how Mary is a key to unity, and how we can be have a unified future.
And Friar Charles, did you have any other ones you wanted to add to that too? And I'm going to put links to them, by the way, but go ahead and add anything else you want to add.
So we have another one called stmaximiliankolbe.com.
Oh, yeah.
That one of our brothers put together, and there's an extremely good video on the. It's more of one of those short inspirational videos rather than a content heavy video that does a very good job of condensing St. Maximilian into 6 minutes. Yes, there's that one. We also have a magazine called the Missio Immaculate. That I think the website for that is Missio, Missio. This is one of the problems with us is we like Latin titles, but it just confuses because we have a radio station, for example, in Massachusetts, Cor Mariae, the Heart of Mary, but you write that all out in lowercase letters, and people have no idea what it is. Cor Mariae, like it's maybe some sort of strange Scotch word or something. But I would say as a parting comment, I would say we just need to. John went to the cross because he went there with Mary. And that in the crosses of our life, if we want to be faithful to Christ in the context of the cross, we need to go there with Our Lady, that she has the role of raising us of birthing Christ into our lives. And we need to draw near to her and let her do that.
Amen. Well, again, brothers, I appreciate y'all coming on so much. I'm going to put links to everything that y'all said there in the description. And like I said, y'all are welcome on any time. But once again, thank y'all so much for your time today.
God bless you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. And everybody, don't forget, of course, comment, like, subscribe, share this on your social media, and also check us out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you wanted to support us. Till next time, God bless.